Welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos. I'm a sociologist who's taught at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and Yeshiva University here in New York City. A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man was James Joyce's first novel and told the story of the intellectual, moral, and spiritual development and struggles of a young Catholic Irishman, Stephen Dedalus, who was Joyce's fictional alter ego. Stephen's surname alluded to Dedalus, who in Greek mythology was seen as a highly respected and renowned, beloved inventor, sculptor, artist, and architect, the consummate craftsman of his day. Our guest today on the Radical Imagination is a modern-day Dedalus. He's an accomplished violinist who studied at Julliard and Indiana University School of Music, a seller, restorer, and appraiser of fine violins, and a conductor who is the founder and music director of the Manhattan Symphonie. Maestro Singer and his orchestra have performed at numerous venues, including Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, Merton Concert Hall, Barge Music, and the United Nations. They have performed on 6 tours of China and have been heavily involved in humanitarian causes and performing for fundraisers for national and international disasters. He's also the author of a popular children's book entitled Spaceman's Adventures on the Planet Earth, a composer of numerous well-received musical works, and an artist whose whimsical sketchings and drawings, brimming with images of fantasy, transcendence, and promise and love, are gaining a wide audience of admirers. Gregory grew up in a musical household. His father was Jacques Singer, a renowned violinist and conductor, and his mother, the pianist Leslie Wright, taught at Julliard. My co-host and love of my life, Beatty Cohan Vrettos, will again join us to add her unique insights, and we'll need them, as a practicing psychotherapist and sex therapist. She's the author of the best-selling Never Make a Mistake in Love Again, a relationship columnist for Dan's Papers in the Hamptons, host of the Ask Beatty show on Progressive Radio Network, an expert guest witness and speaker on numerous national shows, and the key to my joy and happiness in life. So thank you both for being here so very, very much. It really is a blessing to see you both again, and I've just been looking forward to doing this show with you for a long time now. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay.
It's great to see you, Jim.
It is. But I want to start. Well, we've known each other a long time, and I think we did a show several months ago, but what I want to start us off with, because Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man was one of my favorite novels, and since I've known you so long, and now we're both somewhat older, you are such a creative force, and I think what we need to do is start with the portrait of an artist as a child. So Gregory, tell us a little about your incredible background, the artwork that was put in your crib, the the music that was surrounding you as a young child, and so on, and your adventures in Portland and Texas, where you were raised, and then later on, early on in New York City. So start us off as this younger man in a child's body.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you for the introduction. It certainly was very generous and warm-hearted of you. I really do appreciate you also very much. Well, just to get to that point, I was lucky in a sense to be born in Texas, a very warm and sunny environment, later moving to Oregon and then to New York. So in a sense, I was on the coasts of our country. Corpus Christi was a beautiful, warm place for me to run around barefoot. And I can distinctly remember only a few months old, hearing my mother and father playing music together every evening. My father played the violin, as you mentioned. My mother played the piano. So I really grew up from the earliest ages hearing beautiful music from my crib. And also, there were very unusual selections of artwork surrounding my crib and the apartment, the house we lived in Corpus Christi, Texas. Those images I would stare at for hours. I was certainly, in a sense, a captive audience being in my crib, but I was staring at each object and wondering what they were. And they made a great impression on me over the years. So artwork, I didn't realize was always part of my visual interest. And I began noodling and doodling and drawing pictures. And I didn't realize it was really from my earliest childhood memories of looking at shapes and objects and colors.
Interesting. So you're taking notes, right, Beatty? These
early. Is she going to analyze me later?
Oh, well, what we're doing, we're having a little fun here too. But you are such a creative force, and love is so much part of your reason to being, in a sense. And as an accomplished musician, we also want to explore in this show the nature of your feelings about love and relationships. So yes, we will definitely get into that and how it relates to the beautiful music and artwork that you're making.
My father was a conductor, so I also spent many hours listening to rehearsals and concerts and meeting famous musicians. And so I'm just very fortunate in that regard to grow up in a very artistic family in that regard.
But also, if I may throw it over to Beatty for a bit, I mean, your father was a very, very renowned and respected musician and conductor and violinist, and you had the creme de la creme come to your house. He conducted with the best musicians of the day. So that must have been also a little difficult, right? Was there a competition there? How loving was it in terms of or the pressure you might have felt as a young man?
I didn't like the pressure. I did not like the pressure of classical music. Fortunately or unfortunately, I was talented, so I could play a lot of great music. And I went to Meadowmount School of Music in the summertime, and I was very inspired and really enjoyed the great music. But always needing to practice in the perfectionism of classical music, I did not like. And I distinctly remember I was playing in a very important softball game, at least important to me, at the Ainsworth School in Portland, Oregon. And my parents came to pick me up in the 9th inning, and I was playing center field. And Isaac Stern was coming to the house, and they wanted me to play violin for Isaac Stern. So I remember looking over my shoulder as I got into the car to go back to our house and seeing the fly ball hit to center field, and my substitute missing the ball. It hit him on the head and was bouncing around, and the players were circling the bases, and we lost the game. And I went and played the violin for Isaac Stern. But
and you've hated him ever since. So no, I'm teasing.
Well, Beatty, it really was traumatic for me to have to go through all that discipline year after year after year. But it did give me a lot of strength and a lot of respect for classical traditional traditions.
Right. So Beatty, what do you make? This is a treasure trove here of talent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of my questions, Gregory, to you is this. Did you embrace, I mean, you yourself as a young child, did you embrace the world of music and art, or was this somehow, communicated to you by mom and dad that this was something that you should be doing because you came from such an artistic, accomplished family? Was it your choice ultimately, or was there pressure that was placed on you to follow in the family tradition?
It's a very, very good question. And I can tell you, I had the best of both worlds in that regard, because in the beginning, I wanted to play the violin, and there was a little violin up in the closet. My father kept pulling it down and putting it up to my chin. And finally, one day, I was big enough to study, but I didn't realize I had to practice. And as I mentioned, all of the discipline and hard work. So I ran away from it. I had stage fright. I did not like it, but it was most definitely part of my life that I had to deal with. And it was no escape. However, later in life, after I gave up the violin, and at one point I actually broke my violin, broke my bow, and I got very far away from music, and I wanted to see what I would be like to be on the planet without music. And now when I come back to music, it means a lot more to me. In other words, it's now my choice to really enjoy music for the profound memories I have of my family, and it also helps me survive. So it's a real tool for survival, and the music means a lot more to me now that I choose it and really worship it. It's a sanctuary for me.
Interesting.
Right. So you said that it really wasn't about just pleasing your family and following in this amazing family tradition, but this was something ultimately that you have embraced for yourself throughout your life, right?
Well, it's a good point. What I did on a roundabout way is I gave up classical music. I didn't play violin for a few years at least, and it came back to me naturally. When I was working in an orphanage with 12 children and 12 horses in France, they asked me to play a violin, which was up in the closet there in France. And I began to play the violin. Then I began playing violin in the streets of Paris. And so the violin came back to me in a very natural way. And so I had gotten away from the vanity and sort of narcissism of being a Julliard musician and all of the classical music images I had of myself, etc. I got away from all of that. And I came back to playing some French music and some bluegrass music and some Irish music and country Western music. And it helped me survive. And then I began to get back into the very profound classical music. So again, it was full circle. And your question is very, very intuitive. It's really quite a story. Now I feel like I'm almost blossoming again like a beginner because I'm so excited about the profession. I'm not jaded or burned out about music like a lot of my colleagues.
Interesting. Yeah. Fascinating. And the summer camp, just out of curiosity, was that where you met our friend Eugene Fodor?
Yes, I was a little bit younger than Eugene, but I remember Eugene Fodor for two reasons. One, he was a very talented, great violinist. And two, he was a very rebellious character, and he did everything a little bit in a rebellious fashion. One time I remember him running down the street and jumping on the back of a hay wagon that was going up the street, and he got a free ride up about maybe equivalent to 3 or 4 blocks. Of course, we were in the countryside, but I remember he would do many inventive and creative things, and I looked up to him once also for a long time. And he was a great violinist.
But he also went through this competitiveness and the pressures and rigors of the sort of career that, in a sense, also caused him tremendous emotional trauma. Would you say? I know he had a different family background than yours, of course. He, as I understand it, he begged his father to have lessons and to study.
Well, that's a great thing. You know, when a young child loves to play music, the parents should not disturb that. It's a wonderful. It's not so common, but a really wonderful trait. In Eugene's case, he loved to play, and he had probably some things in his life, ups and downs I don't know about, that may have that propelled him up and down. But I can tell you, again, in my case, being very little and having to practice every day, and the competitiveness, I think, is almost child abuse. And I think a lot of classical musicians have been destroyed because they're forced to practice so much, and later they don't play unless they're paid money to play, that they really are. Many times I had a student, for instance, once, a very little teeny student, and the parent thought I wasn't receptive to the parent interrupting the lesson every few minutes, telling the kid to raise their arm and to lower the violin and do this. I said, it's a little baby. The kid is like 4 years old. You know, it takes 20 years to develop such a child to play music. It's a long, devoted effort. So don't pressure the kid right away. Otherwise, the child will play with tension and unhappiness, associate the music with competition, etc. The music should be inspiring and very beautiful. So there are actually very few musicians that love to play music in a natural way. It's very far between to find such a musician.
And Beatty, you've had actual therapeutic experience with treating various musicians at a high level, right? So what Gregory is saying is
absolutely,
not that unusual.
And professional athletes. And as you were talking, Gregory, it reminds me of something that I heard this week about Michael Phelps, the swimmer, and his father was saying, in retrospect, because of the rigor of what was expected, whether you're a swimmer or a musician, and you're really aiming to get to the top, very, very difficult to keep the balance. And Michael Phelps' father was talking about how he felt in retrospect that it may have really been child abuse, just as you were saying. So again, you're wanting to reach the very, very pinnacle and top of your field, and yet there's a personal life, and there's an emotional life, and there's a life beyond, and that is not just about the particular endeavor that you're striving to really become the best at. And I think that just keeping a balance, it's quite.
Well, you said that beautifully. That's very intuitive, very well said, extremely well said. And that's the whole point. It's the humanity behind the musician is so important, their life experience. Now, a 15-year-old violinist or cellist or pianist may not have the life experience that a 35 or 45 or 65-year-old might be able to display and project into an audience. So personally, I like to hear older musicians than the younger musicians. But what you said was extremely articulate and very true. It's the whole human that's very, very important.
And because, again, you and so many other great musicians are so sensitive to the pain and suffering and the awe and wonder of the universe and the world out there, and are trying to communicate with a certain love and giving of talent. What you're also saying is that often gets squelched. And where does it go? What does the...
Yes, it's true. Well, the parents, you see, many times the parents are immigrants. They're coming from other countries. So they arrive in America, and if they're shoemakers, they want their kids to be great shoemakers. If they're musicians, they want the kids to be great musicians. I mean, there's a certain sense of urgency, and that is a way of showing love. When parents are very strict with children, it's also a way of showing love. If they let the kids run wild and don't give them the attention or discipline and some kind of a special talent, sometimes the child may feel unloved. So the attention and respect for hard work and for excelling in this country, in America, it's sort of a tradition that the immigrants' children work very hard and try to do better even than their parents that came from other countries. My father came from Poland. My mother came from Texas, and they both had no great means. They were not wealthy people. Their families were not wealthy. So they really had great ambition to strive together, even musically, and make a life and make a family. So it's very, 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 sometimes a lot of extra pressure, but the pressure almost burned me out, but I was lucky to get back to it. As Beatty was saying, I was lucky to save a little bit of my own humanity.
I think too, Jim and Gregory, again, this balance, when we're spending so much time and energy in wanting to become the best of the best, whether or not we're talking about sports or whether we're talking about art or music, so oftentimes the personal life, the psychic life, the emotional life, the relationship life of people can really be put on the back burner, and that creates a lot of problems in one's real life when we're not performing.
It's true. My sanctuary actually became like doing Broadway shows and tours. And in other words, what I didn't like initially, practicing and all of those concerts that made me nervous, after I got away from music and came back to it, I actually spent many decades doing recording sessions and Broadway shows, and it became interesting. Every new job, meeting new people, playing different kinds of music, even in bars. I played country western music down south, and I played Irish music for Irish festivals. And suddenly music became a ticket for me to different cultures and different people, and actually it kind of saved me. So instead of getting burned out also working 9 to 5 in some jobs in very bad environments, a lot of the modern environments I find very distasteful, suddenly I was still playing the violin, suddenly still staying close to myself in some regards. So it has saved me continue. Now, after COVID, I hope I can continue doing something artistic, because otherwise I don't know what else I can do.
I didn't hear you say anything about any love relationships that you might have also had at this time? I know you worked with Judy Collins too, and a whole bunch of people. I'm just saying,
I did
did you have
Palmer?
Right, but did you have any significant relationships at the time as well, one-on-one sort of? Besides,
well, so you're speaking, in other words, you're speaking, how did I get along with people? How did I get along with people, etc.? Relationships, romances, that kind of thing.
Intimately as well. Well, yeah. Well, we know we can tell already how wonderful, giving, and charismatic you are, and little, temperamental. But right, Beatty, we're talking about significant.
I think we're right. I think the question
what is
asking Gregory is this, with all the focus and attention and energy on the art and on the music, was there time, and did you make time, and did you want to make time for having a significant, intimate love relationship? Because
that's an amazing question. I feel like I'm being analyzed here. No, it's very funny. It's a very good question.
All loving.
No, it's great. It's very intuitive. No, but I want to tell you also, and I had a feeling Beatty could be analyzing a little bit the destruction that I went through also. But what's very interesting is one of my problems, and I'm not saying it's a good thing, in a sense, to the contrary of all of the attention that went into myself playing the violin and watching my career and this and that, or lack of a career, I spent a lot of time helping other people. So, it's easier to help other people than to help yourself. And so in many ways, when I had a violin store and when I was hiring musicians and conducting music around the world, I got mixed up in everyone else's life. I gave them advice. I helped them. I loaned them money. I loaned them instruments. And I can't resist people. In fact, my story sort of bores me. I know my story. I know what I did. To me, it was very simple. I ran away from music. I ran back towards music. It was all about trying to survive in this world. And people are very intense, and they're not very artistic in many ways, and they're being programmed this way and that way. So I find myself a bit lonely now that I'm getting older. But when I was younger, I was with people all the time and found a very pleasant distraction by helping other people and getting mixed up in all kinds of crazy things. I was also an auxiliary policeman here in New York, and I wanted to live a very normal life away from music. So I was wearing 3 or 4 different hats, and I lived many different lives and was very interested in many different things besides music. So that can be a problem also.
You came to my classes, right, at John Jay, because you were interested in prison reform and trying to get this particular individual out of prison who you felt was unjustly.
That's an amazing thing about Jim. Jim is an amazing person, because I never knew what really a sociologist did. But Jim taught me, because Jim cares about people. He cares about each and every person. And I run into Jim every once in a while. We spend a little time together. Then I don't see him for 6 months. Then I see him again. And I was trying to help get a person out of jail that was falsely accused. So Jim invited me on several occasions to speak to his John Jay School of Criminal Justice classes, which was amazing, because he did it simply because he cared. And when I had a music class in South Florida, I invited some local farmers to come to the music class and talk about their fields of tomatoes and things. That they had some political problems with zoning, etc. And I asked them to come and speak to my class of musicians about the zoning problems regarding their irrigation and their tomatoes. And Jim found me, a person running around trying to get attention for a falsely accused person, and Jim brought me into his class, and they asked a lot of questions, and he was amazing. He still is amazing, and he loves to interview people because he also cares about people. And Beatty is the same way. And I've been watching your TV show, folks, and I learned from Beatty also. When Beatty says, be careful who you have around you, what kind of people you accept into your life. And, I began to think about that and began to make some changes. And we've had a lot of time to think about our life during COVID. And I began to do some soul searching, etc. And when Beatty speaks wisdom with her few words, unlike me, of course, I really learned from her, and I'm very impressed by her self-confidence and her wisdom. And Jim, together, the two of them are powerful 1-2 punch. It's a great show, really. I didn't have to distract you. You guys are amazing.
Well, what lovely things that you are saying, Gregory. And I don't know whether you're aware or not, but, Jim and I, we were childhood sweethearts. So we've known each other, a lifetime.
No, I had no idea. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's so beautiful.
Right.
That's really wonderful.
It is.
By the
It
way,
is.
in regard to romance, I wanted to tell Jim that you asked the question. People change every 10 years, it seems. I mean, that's what's so amazing about the two of you getting reunited. But when people go through changes, if they're continuing to do soul searching and wondering about life, the miracle of life, and they think about a little bit of politics and all kinds of different things, sometimes you're compatible with your wife or husband or spouse or significant other, and sometimes you grow in the same direction, or sometimes you grow in separate directions, and you have to be honest about that sometimes and not feel bad about that. It's just natural. And so that's when you talk about romance. Sometimes they last only a year or two, and then you have to sometimes realize you're not compatible, and you should, in a friendly way, go separate directions, perhaps.
I just want to add quickly here. Your parents played together. Did they have a good relationship? It sounded like they had certainly a commonality with their music, their love of music. Did they have a tumultuous relationship? Would you say a loving relationship? Or I mean, they never.
A good question. It's a very good question, Jim. But we'd have to. Every human being on the planet would define love differently, or try to analyze their family. Most people think their family is normal, or most people think their family is very abnormal compared to other families. But I only know my family, and I can tell you that my father came from a very poor family in Poland, came to America broke, and my mother came from basically farmers from Texas, and they were broke. And so when they got together for their love of music, because my father was conducting the Dedalus Symphony and the Corpus Christi Symphony, my mother and my father fell in love with each other, but also they could play great music together. And music was their ticket, was their sanctuary and their future. So I must say, some people like to marry someone completely similar to themselves, sometimes like even two people of the same race or same nationality. And sometimes it's better to marry someone very, very different than yourself. So very opposite. So my father came from a very European Polish background. My mother came from a very American Texas background. They were very different. But I don't know. I know they loved each other, but through their difficult lives, trying to make money, earn a living. My father was conducting, my mother playing piano. If they were millionaires, it would have been different. And since they had to struggle to make a living and put their family through school, etc., it's hard to say, but there was a lot of emotion at the dinner table. Many times there was very intense conversations and raising of voices and stuff. So to me, that passion is acceptable. I mean, it means somebody cares. When they show that emotion, it means that they care.
Hear that, Beatty? That we come from different. Beatty and I come from very different background. That's my background. Yes, like yours, Greg, and Beatty's was much quieter, civil. By the way, they're both. Your mother's Jewish too, or not?
Yeah, my mother was not Jewish. She came from Texas. She came from a I don't know what background. I think it was more like Baptist, probably Baptist.
Baptist, wow. And
my father came from a very Jewish background.
And
my father came from the Cohans.
Well, okay.
My father's father was a rabbi, going all the way back to Moses. They're
part of the remnant.
Aaron, the brother of Moses.
So and we want to okay. So we
and by the way, Jim, that was also a good question. Now, my father was in a sense a Holocaust victim. When he left Europe after all of those things that were going on in being Jewish, etc., he wanted a very American family. So he did not teach us all the languages that he spoke. He wanted us very American, and he named me Gregory, and he named my brothers and sisters such names also, not Jewish names. Although we observed a lot of Jewish holidays, we also observed Christian holidays also. But this was a direct result of the Holocaust. His ancestors and relatives were murdered.
A couple of things just before, and then come on in there, Beatty. You composed this incredibly beautiful memorial processional. How much does that, and we're going to play a couple minutes of that as well in the show here, so the audience will be able to hear it. Is that an influence from your father and the Holocaust and so on?
I don't know. How I write music, I have no idea. But it's funny, when we play the memorial processional, some people whisper in my ear, Gregory, that sounds very Jewish. And that's the way it goes. I mean, the melody came to me. I also went to St. Petersburg, Russia, and I conducted that music for the Leningrad Memorial. And I was very, very fortunate that a clarinet player in my orchestra, the Manhattan Symphonie, Sasha Heifetz, was able to connect me with some people in St. Petersburg that loved that music and thought it was appropriate. And we have played that piece for many memorial concerts, like the Fukushima Sendai concert in Japan, the earthquake, the 9/11 memorial concerts, and things like that. We've done some Chinese concerts, Chinese New Year's concerts. We use the memorial concerts, the memorial processional to play for those kind of occasions. The music just came to me, and people like it very much. I'm very happy with it.
What do you think, Beatty? Is that part of the Jewish heritage coming out?
It sounds, Gregory, like you're in a really good place in your life. And one of the things that I was recently writing in my Ask Beatty column for Dan's Papers was that if I was a fairy godmother and I could grant you, any wish at this point in your life, what would you wish for?
Well, I'm sure if I thought about it, there's many, many things, but without thinking about it too much, I will just tell you that I personally think life is an absolute miracle, and that being able to see and hear, I mean, ideally, even people who don't see and hear well or at all have a magical existence. But life is so amazing, and I believe I've survived a lot of ups and downs, and the music has helped me survive into new decades, that I wish I had more access to people, in a sense, audiences. I want to share more beauty, more music, more art. So I'd like to be a role model and show that people can be happy and healthy at later stages of their life, that they can be happy and creative. And so in one sense, I am very happy with my career, playing in Carnegie Hall 5 times, tours, and reaching out, writing my own music, doing my own artwork. I mean, I really feel blessed in many ways to have had a very, very good life. But I would like to reach the media, because I'm a little concerned that a lot of the things going on television and on the news and around the country are very negative and divisive. And I'd like to unite people with the music. And I'd like to have all kinds of guest conductors and guest soloists playing music from all over the world. And I think my Manhattan Symphony could do that. And we spell symphony with an I-E on the end of the word symphony. But that's my thing, is it's not about me, but it's about sharing for other people, making other people happy. I would really enjoy that. I would enjoy really reaching out. My lovely orchestra, you wouldn't believe the multinational people, multi-ethnic, and the kind of music that we do. They're so wonderful, and they need a place to make music. I mean, musicians need a place. There's a funny expression: more than the farmer needs the milk, the cow needs to give it. Well, I'm like that cow. I need to give art and music to a very God-forsaken world.
Very briefly, you started the Manhattan Symphony. You founded it in 2005.
That's correct.
So it's an 80-person orchestra. This is we have clips that we're going to show, and we have you play serious music, and then you're also, well, I shouldn't say it's all serious, but you play Copland, the hoedown, your own compositions. So, and you're right, the musicians are all very from all kinds of parts of the world and so on. And it's very impressive. I really, as you can imagine, I very much admire that. I love to see that happen in the musical world as well. We need so much of it. Oh,
can I play the tune I wrote for China?
Yeah, why not? Certainly.
I just played the opening melody. It sounds like an erhu. I wrote it for when I went on tour in China, and I wrote a big orchestral piece which starts out with that kind of a melody, which sounds like an erhu. But I want you to know I play country western music with the orchestra and all kinds of music. We did a Michael Jackson number, Barry White, the Love Unlimited theme, and all kinds of things. So again, I love to make audiences happy. When I was a kid, I was bored by a lot of the strict classical music. So I always feel a certain empathy for my audience. So when I go on stage, it's showtime.
Well, you relate to that too, right, Beatty?
Absolutely. Regardless of how we're feeling, right? We need to be ready to perform.
That's right. Ready at a moment's notice.
No, for sure, for sure.
If you want to hear any bluegrass or Irish, I'll play for you also 20 seconds. But otherwise,
how about the waltz, the Central Park waltz? Can you do a
Central Park waltz? I woke up one day with this melody in my head, and I was very embarrassed because it reminds me of some kind of an ice skating rink. But then later in the week, I wrote another melody or two, which I attached to the main melody. And so the Central Park waltz is a favorite of many people. And I've written it also for the entire orchestra. So it's a lot of fun, but I was a little bit embarrassed, a little ashamed to play the Central Park waltz. But, but I will play it for you real quick. It goes like this.
Okay.
And it goes on to another. But thank you. That's a Central Park waltz. Imagine. When I'm in a very good state of mind, and it's not often because there's a lot of tension and stress in the city, but when I feel happy for a day or two, music comes to me when I sleep at night. And if I'm fortunate enough to wake up and have paper and pencil nearby, I'll write down the melody that I heard. And I feel obligated to write it down. Otherwise, I feel like I won't be blessed with that kind of a visitation in the future.
Wow. So it's a very creative inner life that you're dealing with.
That's a good point, Jim. In fact, the inner life is what keeps me going, because when I walk down the street, or many times when I'm at home, I'm thinking of music. So other people are angry with me or impatient, or maybe they're not happy with things. But I wonder, how can they be so unhappy? There's music everywhere and such beauty and life everywhere. But of course, I understand. I go through difficulties also. But when I have music flowing in me, it gives me a totally different perspective about life. It's like having a soundtrack to your life.
So for, again, 20 seconds, transport us down to the deep South. You're in one of these Southern bars or something. All right, here we go.
Yeah. There you have it.
You've won them over. It's beautiful. It's the way art and creativity should be. It really is, in my opinion. You're creating beauty and connection, social connection.
That's what you and Beatty are doing. You both are trying to find creative, happy people and bring them to your TV show. So you and Beatty are real champions for this, and I think that's really, really wonderful.
I think one of the challenges, for all of us, really for everybody, is trying to figure out and to ask ourselves the question whether or not we're living our life in ways that are really in our best interest, professionally, emotionally, psychologically, relationally. Because I certainly find in my own practice, I see a lot of very successful people, successful in a variety of different, endeavors and careers. And yet on a personal level, they are not living their lives in ways that are in their best interest. And of course, that's why they're contacting me, to work out some of their issues, whether it's the depression, anxiety, or unfinished business, or what I call skeletons in their closet from perhaps
right.
So it's a real juggling act, isn't it?
It is. One thing I've learned lately, one thing I try to hold on to is, because after many years, you get some ideas. I think the main thing is to try to be very honest, and not to be ashamed of your feelings, not to be embarrassed, because we're all hiding things so much that we're sort of living with a sort of exterior image, that I think a lot of our feelings, we all feel the same anyway. We all would agree. So if somebody says, I don't really like that because of this, or I feel good about this because of that, it's okay, because somebody else will say, I feel the same way, or I'm glad you said that because I was a little bit embarrassed to say that. But I think it's important to be honest and not to feel guilty, because you carry that stuff around with you and it makes you unhappy. And if you're unhappy, find out why you're unhappy, honestly. If it's because you don't have any money or you don't have any friends, well, find out why. Why did you lose friends, or how do you make friends, or where do you know, what is friendship? Maybe you're not friendly to other people. So start off by being friendly to somebody else. But by asking only those questions without any fear, I think one can make tremendous progress. And that's what I'm doing all the time. But it does make you still, in a funny way, ironically, a little bit lonely, because other people may not be quite so diligent asking those questions.
I think that most people are not that diligent asking those questions. And I have a mantra that I try to live by and I try to impart to my patients. And that mantra is acknowledge and address and resolve as best as we can, even though we can't change our history, the things that continue to get in the way of our life and relationships. And that's a challenge, but it's really
it's very difficult, but very true and very well said. It's beautifully said. It's very simple, but very hard to do. We do everything but follow those ideas.
Right.
I know, Gregory, you've lost your mother fairly recently, and I know I went a few times. You used to play at the nursing home that she was staying in, and it was quite an event. And she played with you as well at times, piano there. I wonder what, if they could be here right now, what your father would be saying to you as he hears you talk, and your mother as well.
I think they'd be happy. I regret that I was still very immature when my father died. If I had been more mature, I might have been able to put together an orchestra for him to conduct, because it's very hard for a conductor to find an orchestra, but I could have built one for him, and I could have enjoyed him as an adult more than just being a child. But my mother loved music. She played piano all day long. And I think that they left that with me, the love for music. And I think they'd be happy to see me struggling. Although my mother told me a very funny story, which she may notice I've fallen into a bit. She said there was a person, this is sort of what do you call an adage or something? It's a person was paid to work for somebody, and they were shining the brass cannon. Beatty must know this story, but the person's paid to shine a brass cannon. So they shine the brass cannon for years and years and years. And finally, they saved up their money and they eventually retired. But what did they go out and buy with their money? They went out and bought their own brass cannon to shine. And so I'm with music all the time. So whenever I see an empty building, I think, oh, that would make a nice music school, or that would make a nice concert hall, or, I'm always thinking of musical things. So that's my brass cannon. I think I've resolved in life to be an artist, to draw pictures, make paintings, and play music. And I really can't think of other worlds that exist. And so that's one thing that a very good thing in a way, my mother and father left me. And I think they might feel sorry for me a little bit because it's very hard in the 21st century to be that kind of a person. But I think they'd be proud of me living that kind of simple life.
But you, like Beatty, are a real doer. You make things happen. You put people together. So again, as you've established this wonderful symphony, we know it's a struggle to find venues and find backing. And I mean, you're talking about enormous amounts of money, right? To go on tours and to get more and more people to.
Not really, Jim. A lot of the orchestras are union orchestras, and they need millions of dollars. My orchestra is not a union orchestra. The Manhattan Symphonie is an orchestra of great musicians from all over the world, and they want to play great music. And we raise money here and there. We're with NYFA, New York Foundation of the Arts, so people who donate, they get a tax write-off. But we're not that expensive. Now, my working associate tells me, don't tell people that. Don't say that. Don't say we're cheap or we play easily. But the fact is, you can get a wedding band. Probably it was more expensive than my 60-piece orchestra. And we play great music, but it's like, just call up. I mean, we're at manhattansymphony.com, but try to make contact if you want to really be a sponsor, a real patron of the arts. This orchestra's been around over 20 years. Since at least 2005 anyway. And I'm telling you, we're very deserving for a real sponsor who doesn't care about their name going up on a big wall or a big plaque, but really wants to help us make music, because we'd like to have one concert a month, 12 concerts a year. And then we can do recording sessions for other composers. We can do outreach programs for the schools, for the children. We can do a tour coast to coast. We can do movie soundtrack music, and we can become we can actually make money and become very profitable. But we need a little push, a little proper support. And New York City should have a couple of major orchestras. Why only one orchestra? London and Berlin and Paris have 3 or 4 orchestras. New York needs more culture. Believe me.
It's a great point. Great point. Yeah. So how are you? How can we reach you?
Well, I would say GregorySingerArt.com, GregorySingerArt.com, and ManhattanSymphonie.com, and symphony spelled with an IE. And Jim and Beatty, thank you very much for inviting me on the show, because this may be a break for me. I was slowing down a little bit because it's hard to keep beating the drum, and trying to solicit funds and coming up with ideas for this and that and fundraisers and memorial concerts. So I was a little bit slowing down, but if there's any way of finding a really serious person who loves music and art and realizes we've paid our dues, all of us, give us a shot. It would be wonderful that your show, you have a very show that's based on humanity and culture and arts. You two are terrific champions, and I would love that person to take a gamble on us, risk on Manhattan Symphonie or on GregorySingerArt.com. I am a semi-bohemian artist type character that is finding less and less to really shine in the 21st century. And maybe your show would help really give me a foot up, a leg up, a break. A nice opportunity would be terrific.
Well, we will absolutely try. We will try. And I know we've seriously, we've had just recently a couple of wonderful people that I think I mentioned to you, the executive director of Musicians for Human Rights. So we will make these connections because it's so important. Do you want to, we do have a couple more minutes. Do you want to play a couple more short pieces?
Well, I'd be happy to, yeah. I'll play you just a few snippets of some things I've written recently, and
Great.
I'll skip around maybe abruptly. So here's one.
Beautiful, beautiful, very moving. Bluesy. What? Now this is recent. This is a recent composition. Just came to you while you were sleeping. Woke up and there it is.
That's correct.
Can I just say something, Jim?
Yeah,
Gregory? It doesn't sound like you're slowing down at all. And I think for all the viewers, this is the message that I want to.
Well, that's great. I'm so lucky.
The message is that
I'm very lucky if that's your message. I really appreciate that.
Well,
COVID slowed us down a little bit. We couldn't play music. We couldn't gather together. So it kind of knocked the wind out of our sails.
But to never give up, which is something that my father taught me, and to continue to follow our dreams. And it's amazing what happens when we stay in the game.
I'm very inspired by you.
I agree with Beatty. Gregory, you're not slowing down. Neither is Beatty. Neither is I. We are not. The Radical Imagination is not slowing down. We are continuing on. Thank you both so very, very much for being here on the show. I really, really enjoyed it. I love you both very, very much. And thank you all so very, very much for watching us here on The Radical Imagination. This is Jim Vrettos. We'll see you again on The Radical Imagination.